Hello everyone, my name is Tags, and today I wanted to do a tier list video with the legendary dice for the year 2024 in the current PvP meta. This is just my opinions only, as others would think differently about dice due to what they like and dislike. I won't be doing this alone, as I have 5 others with me. If you guys would like to introduce yourself real fast.
My name is Tiggy, and just like Tags, I also make videos on different topics regarding random dice.
My name is Rom, and I've been a top 10 player, and I'm currently in the top 100.
My name is RG, and I am also a current top 100 player.
My name is AP, and I'm unfortunately an aspiring top 100 player.
Hello everyone, I'm known as Established in the Random Dice community, and I'm a veteran player of Random Dice.
So I guess we'll start with the variable dice. What do you guys think?
Trash tier.
Trash tier?
Trash tier.
We haven't really explored it yet. It could be a low C tier.
It's
No,
just
it's trash tier.
it feels
The
like
dice
with
has
the
a...
lack, it feels like with the lack
the
of
di-
control you have over whether it's up or down, having to
What
put
about
things in
reverse?
like Mimic to make it more consistent feels like a big crutch you're putting on yourself.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
tried
but
to use it a
reverse.
couple times with different stuff, like the combo deck and all. If they switch it to where when you joker an up arrow, it turns into another up arrow, or like the same with a down arrow, that would make it a lot better, in my opinion. Make it a little more consistent. But as of right now, yeah, it's not consistent enough for
Or
me.
can you manipulate it with reverse?
I mean, you can, but why would you use variable and reverse in the same deck?
Yeah,
They serve the same
Trash
purpose.
tier.
Yeah, because when everyone did
Yeah.
the testing, they were trying to take out reverse and put in the variable instead, like the Predignition deck, etc. But I just think it's not as good right now.
Yeah.
It's too unreliable, that's its major downfall, so it's
Yeah,
trash tier in my
I agree.
opinion.
Maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll give it a buff in the future. Who knows? All right. Tsunami dice. What do you guys think?
S
PvP
tier.
are
A tier.
A tier.
S tier
tier.
to
S
high
tier
A tier.
right here in PvP.
So why do you think it's A tier? If you don't mind me asking.
It can be used very well, and it's percent damage, but it doesn't fit with all the decks still. It is a bit
Well,
limited.
Well, my opinion is that Tsunami is a dual-purpose dice. It can act as a supporting dice or a DPS dice, depending on what deck you use it in. And it also has synergy with Reverse and Joker. A lot of the popular decks on leaderboards, if you look at the top 10, most prevalent are Nuke decks, and they also incorporate Tsunami. It also has knockback and does percentage damage, which is also very handy because it's just as good as early game as it's good at late game. And it's not entirely class dependent, but obviously class up does give it more of a boost and makes it even more OP in my opinion. So I think it should be an A tier. You can
think
make an
it's
argument that it should be S tier, but that might be a bit too high.
I think it's an S tier because it's just an all-rounder co-op, PvP, and raid. It's good everywhere. Except for co-op. I mean, you can
We're not talking
kinda
about, we're only talking about
Challenge
PvP.
Challenge
yeah.
It's
cool.
PvP.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's
Well,
I think it's gotta at least deserves A because, like people have said, it can serve as like a really all-arounder. But I think it's important to know that like Dimension, at least in like the Korea, Japan's areas, Dimension is really prevalent, and it's probably gonna move over to the US at some point. And Tsunami is the only thing that can stop it, really. There's no other dice that has like a knockback effect like Tsunami does. That makes it very, very unique.
Okay. Yeah. I mean that's fine with me. I
Mhm.
I think that it's S tier, but that's a little biased in my opinion. But I'm totally fine with making that A tier if you guys are alright with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's S tier, but A tier is fine too.
I mean, it's high A tier to low S tier, like, it's pretty given.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Soul dice. What do you guys think?
Uh,
Oh,
A
it's
tier.
very branded, and it's B tier because it can very easily be defeated with Dimension,
I
and
think
it has
it's
some counter decks.
I would say A tier because it is very vulnerable to certain dices, and it can also have a rough start if you don't happen to get a soul. If you get the first soul, you can very well like survive, but if you don't get that first soul, you're probably just gonna die.
Yeah, it's kind of like solar, but better.
I think it has to be an A tier because if you compare it to every other like straight up DPS dice, you're
It's
looking at,
probably the
like
best.
recharge, you could say solar, like guardian. These dice, like none of them really match up to the same kind of output that this thing can provide. So for that reason, it has to be in A tier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
18.
another thing to add is that Soul Dice by itself can go to wave 14 if the Berserk bosses behave, and you can run paired up with other aggressive dice with like Silence or even Royal, and you can beat matchups that you normally shouldn't be able to. And it has a very fast attack speed, so even a low class Lunar can make it hit Berserk waves, which is impossible with any other DPS dice in the game as well.
Yeah, I could agree with
So,
A tier. Along with, I would say also because along with the ease of use of the deck, because it's a lunar deck as well, sort of like how Recharge used to be, as just by itself. Yeah, like you were saying, just by itself, it's actually really strong as long as the bosses behave, etc. So I'm cool with making that A tier.
Also, the Ghost Mob missions actually indirectly helps a Soul player, so that's also another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, granted you're playing on scope board, which
Scope
you really
board.
should be if you're playing Soul.
Yeah.
All right.
Alright,
Okay.
next.
One we have is the Dimension dice.
Well,
Eh.
it can be S tier when played, right?
It's
Eh,
mainly B tier in my opinion.
I think
Come on.
it is really strong. However, I think it has to go in B tier because it has like a lot of weaknesses, and you're very reliant on what boss you get. Like if you don't get slimes, most of the time you're just going to lose because there's nothing you can do when it's just like a bunch of IXs. And it's like in pretty much all the dimension decks, there's nothing to prevent or nothing to defend yourself against things like assassin, and you become
Well,
very weak to that.
I'm mainly a Dimension player. There is only a couple of times that I didn't get a single slime at all.
Well, it's not that Dimension is a bad dice. It's used in a way that it's very gimmicky, but if your gimmick doesn't work, it's basically useless in the deck.
Yeah.
I think it's also B tier because like people play Nuke Shield and stuff, and like if the dimension doesn't pop up at the back, you know how some players get the dimension at the back, they have a shield and they can send a bunch of mobs and kill a player. If the dimension doesn't pop up there and you don't get the timing, you're just kind of dead. Like you can't really prevent that.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's not very consistent because if you don't get slimes, then, I mean, it's basically useless because depending on whether you use the Storm or the Nuke variant, if you play the Nuke one, yeah, you could try and cheese them with the mobs in the back if they're like all bunched up. But if they're running a deck that has a high Lunar, you're not going to get away with that unless you get them like real early. So I would say B tier is totally fine for that.
Yeah. Plus, like you have to a lot of times if players know what they're doing, you have to get at least 2 slimes because you can always like deactivate your Lunar or reverse down your DPS so that you don't split the slime. So that makes it so that you kind of have to get 2 slimes, and that just doesn't really happen. And especially in like Storm Dimension, you can't really go that far. So you're really relying on the gimmick of getting slimes.
Yeah.
There also
we don't-
isn't like the biggest variety of dice that you can use it with. You need to have a lot of control over your damage if you're gonna use it. Like you have to use Storm, Star, Nuke, Tsunami, and those dices, for example. So you are able to send it on the back.
Also, not to mention, you also have to run a slow or AoE to help you time your dimension better and make it harder for the opponents to DPS the boss down before they kill it and take hearts. Like I said, it's a good dice in the hands of a skilled player, but since the fact that it's very inconsistent makes it not a high-ranking dice on the tier list, unfortunately.
We don't have to talk about the next dice.
Well, it's a part of the list, so we sort of need to real quick. I mean, obviously, we already know it's. I mean, we obviously know it's the best, dice in the game. Obviously,
Just put it in
Obviously.
S tier.
S
Just
tier,
put it in
obviously.
S tier.
It honestly deserves its own tier, above S tier.
Yeah, but
Hey, it's
S
S tier
stands
for satellite,
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right. So then, There we go. Much better.
There we go.
Uh,
Oh,
Yeah, I think it needs a buff still. I don't think it's that good. Even though I know there's somebody that agrees with me on that, but I just think it needs some more love. It needs another buff, in my opinion, for it to be a usable dice. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you want to give out a bunch of free wins, but I'm not a fan of doing that, you know?
I mean, there is some sort of a synergy with Blizzard rework with damage vulnerability stacks, and you can one-shot bosses and stuff. But the fact that it has a whole mini game on where you have to time the orbital strike, which can be an argument made to be having a high skill cap, I guess, but it's just too inconsistent. It just needs to have a rework, in my opinion.
Okay.
It just needs to be removed.
Anything else on that?
nope.
I think that's good.
All right, cool. All right, next we got the Devil Sword dice.
For
Pre-nerf,
We're talking pre-nerf or
probably
post-nerf?
S tier.
Well,
But
currently,
post-nerf,
so
it's
post-nerf.
A tier.
I think
Oh,
it's
It's like
A tier.
low A tier. It's low A tier.
Yeah,
I
I'll
agree with
I'll
that.
put it A tier.
I think it's A tier because you can pretty much fit it, or like you can use it like with relative ease, and you can also, it's very good because you can pair like an aggro dice with it, just throwing like growth, reverse, wind, and devil sword, and then you can pretty much throw anything you want into that last slot, and that
Mhm.
makes it pretty versatile.
The most common variant is Ignition, just to help you win missions, and since Devil Sword can go into Berserk waves, you stand a good chance of winning the game as well.
Yeah, I
There's also a
agree.
variation of like Ignition and Phantom, which is even more awful fun.
That doesn't really work anymore though.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
pre-nerf,
that was pre, so we don't
but
count that.
post-nerf, it basically killed that deck, thank god.
Yeah, but post nerf is kinda got a buff when you're above C10 on it, but it also got a nerf.
If I'm correct, did someone say if the Devil Sword is above C8, then it's stronger than it was before the nerf?
No, C9.
No, C9.
C9.
It needs to be
C9.
yeah. C8 and C7 are both weaker than it was pre-nerf, and then C9 and above is stronger, assuming that you're applying it every second you can.
Yeah,
So
I
you
agree
maximize
with
the
the
amount
whole.
of levels.
Oh, sorry about that. Go on.
No, I was like, if you maximize the levels on Devil Sword, it is overall stronger, but you also have to keep in mind that it also eats pips a lot faster,
Mhm.
right? So you also have to like balance between getting levels and not killing your own board.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
before it was an aggro deck, and now it's an outlast deck.
Well, kind
Well,
of.
not
It
not
is still
really.
an aggro deck because it's often paired up, like I said before, Ignition or Royal.
Yeah,
Because you,
Ignition.
I
because you're
think.
trying
Well,
to.
I think it all depends because the Ignition one. The only thing I could say is the drawback of it is there will be a point where you won't be able to outlast your opponent because your wins are just not going to be able to keep up, and
Yeah,
it
and
sucks, but it
Leon's
is what
also
it is.
destroyed.
I mean, since Devil Sword's reliant on overall pips, one Berserk Leon basically cuts your damage in half. Well, at least that's what it feels like.
Yes, because
But-
mainly now you can't get away with just running Bubble and Ignition anymore. Like you need the
Mhm.
Devil Sword pips now.
Also, you need a fast attacking dice now, so you cannot run Double Growth Silence on Prism, which was, everyone's favorite deck to go up against.
Interestingly enough, I've seen that ran on Blessing recently, but
I think it still works. It just doesn't go as far as it used to, which is I think a good change because it used to
Which
go
is,
way too far for
Mhm.
what it had.
I agree that deck was very OP at the time.
Mm-hmm. Good riddance.
All right, I guess we can
Dude,
move
that
on to the next one, which would be Phantom
Trash
Thief.
tier. Trash tier.
Okay,
God,
Phantom Thief, the ultimate board destroyer.
it's A
Even after
tier.
the even after
Unfortunately,
the
it's A
nerf
tier.
is A tier.
Yes.
Because
Unfortunately,
it just destroys the board of your opponent. You can't really do nothing about it except merge away.
It can
Yeah.
be hard to like survive early game with it because it has a very low damage. But if you get past the start, it's just gonna be really annoying.
You usually pair it up with solo, so yeah.
well, the main problem is that when you reverse the Phantom Thief dice against its flower charges back, which just makes it super annoying to face against, and it indirectly hard counters any slow deck, any slow build-up deck, because there are decks that you basically cannot run just because Phantom Thief is a meta dice.
Third dimension players hate next one.
Yeah, I would also say that if you run a deck that is not very well, that's very slow in the beginning too, you would hate to go up against this dice.
I mean, Pride Ignition basically hates facing Phantom Thief because you just cannot build up your board. Well, if you're just playing against Phantom Thief, it just
Yeah, well,
it's
all
really
decks
harder. Yeah,
fall
it's
to
just
Phantom
annoying.
Thief in some aspect.
I mean, there is no deck that basically hard counters Phantom Thief. Well,
Except Hyperson.
except Hyperson, but then again, Hyperson can counter any deck in the game in the beginning. But
Switch.
Yo,
In
but
the-
nobody runs Switch
Um,
like that.
no good deck has Switch, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
yeah, Phantom Thief is sadly in the A tier.
All right,
Alright, next we have Solar.
I'd say it's a C tier dice.
No, B tier.
I think B tier.
Eh,
Like
B
it's
tier.
not good because it provides like AoE without needing to bring scope board, but its DPS output compared to other dice like Soul is just not on the same level.
It's really strong early game, especially without it doesn't need anything else. Like right off the bat, and also quite strong against IX.
Yeah,
And
the
then
splash
they-
damage.
It makes Hyperson players cry because the damage output is so strong.
Alright, anything else on Solar?
Nope.
Alright, cool. Next we have Reverse.
S.
Reverse S tier.
S tier,
S tier.
100%.
S tier.
I would definitely say S tier for sure.
Reverse just gives you a lot more control over your pips. It really helps you reduce the RNG factor this game
Yeah,
has.
what the hell is a Joker dice?
Does tie
Well-
for the best tier in the game, but like Ron was saying, it gives you flexibilities on a higher pip dice, which because before Reverse was added, getting 7-pip supplements or growths or other unwanted legendaries was like the most heartbreaking thing ever. But since Reverse was added, it basically removed a lot of the annoyance in the game and gives you more flexibility on how you want to build up your board, which is very nice.
Yeah, in my opinion, a reverse should have been Joker trade.
I never thought about that.
And yeah, I
but
never
possibly?
thought about it that way.
Possibly.
I just don't see how that would really be the same or
Well, yeah, that is true.
work out.
Ah, well, who cares?
Alright, so I guess that's good for that. How about the Predator dice?
A
Predator.
tier, baby.
Alright,
No,
Predator, yeah,
not biased, but A tier.
A tier.
I would
A
say
tier
it's A
next
tier
to
as well,
Tsunami.
yeah. It's not like the best dice in the game because obviously because it got nerfed and all, but I still think it's a very solid dice. Not to mention,
I'd say next to
I do
Soul.
love Predator decks with Ignition and Growth.
I'd
So-
say
Predator
on the line with
is-
Soul.
The third most consistent dice that can get to Berserk waves and not fall off, as well as it can be paired up with aggressive dice as well. Like Tag said before, Pred Ignition is very prevalent because it's very strong against certain types of decks, and also Pred is very versatile as well. The only drawback is that you have to pair it up with Clone, but that's about it.
I think this works very similar to Devil's Sword in a way where it's pretty self-sufficient, and I think basically instead of running Growth, you can just run Clone. And yeah, like people said, you just pair it up with Reverse and some other aggro dice, usually Ignition, and that's all you need.
Alright, any other opinions on it?
Yeah, it would be S tier, but aggro exists, in my opinion.
Also, missions are sometimes very unfriendly towards Pred. We love getting night debuff on summon less dice or spawn less. That's always
you
fun.
can say the same
Yeah.
about Summoner trait.
Those are the only weaknesses for that
Unless-
deck, basically. The
unless-
summon less missions and aggro decks like IX10 and Hyperson.
Exactly.
And
As it is very
also
slow in the
annoying.
beginning.
Alright, how about Overheat dice?
Overheat with trade is A tier. Without trade, maybe like low B tier.
I say C tier,
C
honestly,
tier,
because
because
without
C,
trade,
low B or C tier, yeah. But with trade, it's easily A tier.
Okay, we could say it's A tier because usually by now everyone's going to be using it with the trade anyway. And I guess this could also apply to the combo dice as well. and Guardian.
Yeah.
Just has slow attack speed, so you need C12 Lunar with it.
Yeah, it is not very versatile in the fact that you do need Lunar with it, but
Mm-hmm.
I still think that's like its ability to basically negate any aggro is really good.
Yeah, it
I
seems
mean,
like a very safe choice to use because it could always obviously block all those assassins and IX-10s and stuff. The only drawback is you need to make sure you have some caffeine ready when you play the deck, but other than that, I mean,
well,
it's a very
that is
solid
true.
choice to use.
Although I would say that overheat decks are in the current meta are slightly less strong due to the prevalence of ignition, but other than that, it's still a very good deck and it's viable.
Yeah, it's a good choice if you're seeing a lot of aggro decks and you don't want to lose to Hyper Sinning or something like that.
Well, that's if you spawn overheat, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, but you also have Bubble, so it helps.
Mm-hmm.
All right, how about Gravity Dice?
With the
Um,
trade, without the trade, it's kind of a dice. Like C tier.
Maybe low C
High C
tier
tier?
because the trade is actually not horrible if you're using Graph Bow, but it's not strong at all. There are just far better
Yeah.
aggressive options. Like, why would you use Gravity when you can use Royal or
Phantom Thief.
Silence? Even IX is better.
Yeah, also
I just-
because the fact that it takes way too long for it to hit anything, it could easily be reversed. It seems like.
Yeah, I think just because of the existence of reverse
Of
and it being
reverse,
in
yeah.
almost every deck, I think like this will do absolutely nothing 90% of the time.
Okay. Next one.
All right, next we
Whoa.
have the. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to add anything, Devil?
No, I was just getting ready for Flow Dice.
Oh,
So-
okay. Yep. So, what do you think of Flow?
In my opinion, I think it's A tier. Flow is a very
Yeah.
good dice.
It's
I
only
just-
A tier when it's combined with an aggro dice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Flow like amplifies the effect of an aggro like greatly.
Yeah, greatly. It
Yeah.
greatly reduces your time span to recover, and since that's exactly why it's paired up with Royal or Silence, because you just need to silence the opponent's DPS, and then Flow just basically kills them within 4 seconds. There's
Yeah,
nothing you
and
can do about it.
Storm Dimension, I mean, any Storm player hates this one.
Yeah, it seems like the only weakness to it are basically Lunar decks. If
Yeah.
they don't have an
Yes.
aggro with the flow, basically.
Well, let's just
Well,
say
the
yeah,
main
like, it's A tier when you
drawback
pair
is-
with an aggro, but
Mhm.
if you
It's-
don't have any aggro, it's pretty weak.
Yeah,
Right.
especially with the solo meta right now.
Also, it's kind of vulnerable in the beginning because obviously Flow doesn't have a basic attack. So if you spawn 4 flows and you merge and you get 2 more flows and then you merge and you get a 3-5 flow, well, there's nothing you can do about it.
Okay. Yep, that is true. All right. Anything else on Flow?
No, not really.
All right, cool. Rage Dice.
Rage dice.
Rage
So
dice.
it,
A tier, I would say.
I would say
it's B tier.
It's B
A tier.
tier. No, I would say it's B tier, honestly.
I
It
think
has
it's big
high
as well
dice
now. It
requirements.
used to be, well, obviously it used to be a lot better. Last season it was one of the seasonal dice, so it was a little bit better at the time, but now I would say it's definitely B tier because it's not as good as it used to be.
Yeah, and even though you have to have C11, at least C11 rage and 2000 something crit for it to work.
Yeah, I think as of recent, it's very underpowered compared to the other options that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that just
And
makes it B.
At least it counters Hyperson.
if you want to use Rage effectively, it needs to be paired up with Scope Dice and Bubble Dice, and it's preferred if you have the Growth trait as well, so you don't overgrow your board and stand a better chance at winning missions.
And Joker for better bubble pairs.
And Joker. 4 pairs. Just the rework, and sorry, not the rework, the nerf made it so it needs to be fairly high class to be good, which is not realistic for majority of the players, so it's B tier.
All right. Anything else for Rage?
No.
Hmm.
Compression dice S tier.
All right. The compression dice. Sorry about that.
I'm going to have a depression
S
after
tier.
talking about this. It's C tier.
Thing, the compression is
Do you think it's C tier?
Trash
could-
tier.
I mean,
Here.
Fireball
compression is
in
good
one
is
deck,
like
and I
saying
thought-
that satellite dice is bad.
Without the trade, it's kinda. It's not very useful.
Yeah,
But
without
even with
trade,
the
it's
trade-
not even useful. And
With the trade, it's still
just-
kinda.
It's
kinda
still
not very
inconsistent
good.
with the trait as well, so it's like it's not even reliable damage. It's just not a good dice.
Yeah, it's very inconsistent in general. So I think it's
If
too
compression was
inconsistent.
made a common dice, I wouldn't be surprised because there's no way this dice should be legendary.
Agreed.
All right. So, are we going with the Are we going with the trash tier for it then, or?
Here.
I'd say
Low
so.
C or trash.
I
Trash
think
tier.
low C.
Trash.
Yeah,
Trash tier for sure. Now, Bubble, on the other hand,
Bubble.
Ooh,
So I'd say it's A tier.
high A tier. High,
Yeah,
high.
High, very high.
I think in the
Yeah.
sense of PvP, I think it has to be S tier because
S
it's
or
super
I.
important.
You should probably put it left to Soul.
I guess you could
Or
say it is
S
S tier because it could help certain decks go really, really far.
I
if
think
played
in-
correctly.
I think in the idea of PvP, it is super important in not just making decks go super far, but protecting yourself against aggro and berserk bosses. And like in PvP, that is super important.
Not to mention, it also gives you more damage because of the crit rate.
Yeah, and that lets
Which
you
is-
put out things like Lunar. Like you can just use Predator and just bring Bubble, and then you have the protection, and it boosts your damage by a lot.
Yeah, it is very strong in co-op as well, obviously. Even though it's not as popular there, because it's a bit harder to play it and especially more annoying. But if you do use it, it's still very strong and can add a lot of waves.
I mean, combo bubble is very flexible and it very aggro resistant, mainly due to the fact that it's utilizing bubble as well. So bubble is, yeah, S tier dice. The rework where you can spread the bubbles is really good. That basically what made bubble really good in PvP because it got rid of all the RNG factor where the bubbles will go.
Okay, I can agree with it being S tier. How about Ignition?
Oh, easy
I
S
said
tier.
It is A tier.
Best aggro dice
S
in the
tier.
game.
Yeah, S tier.
S tier.
I think with the fact that missions are
Exist.
really important in PvP, I think it has to be S tier because it makes you win pretty much every mission.
Yes, there was a saying that I
and-
was saying as a joke. Oh man, how did it go? If you use Ignition, you will win the mission.
Oh,
It's just so true sometimes with
words.
certain decks.
Like there's nothing more tragic than having a like useless SP mission and you're facing Ignition because they just have to merge one pair and you lose like 10k of your SP.
Or just use more SP mission and you're playing against Ignition and you're sitting there with
Exactly.
0 SP.
It's
Or
like
if you
ah,
summon more
Especially
dice or summon X amount of dice, yeah.
Looks
Yeah.
especially good against Overheat and Storm.
And
Yes.
Nuke decks
it's
as
basically
well.
Yes.
it's basically a hard carry.
Yeah, Nuke.
Yeah, Nuke, Overheat, and Storm are very, very weak. When they see Ignition, they're crying.
Speaking of Nuke, looks like Nuke is next. What do you guys think? I think honestly, right now it's either B or A tier.
Yeah.
I
B
think
tier?
I want to say B tier.
tier honestly because it just gets screwed over by missions heavily.
I think it has to be in B because it really only works in a single deck, aka Nuke Shield. And it's not as strong. It's not really that strong. Its ability to one-shot things is good, but it also either requires a lot of SP or time to really use it.
Well, it has a skill cap. The Nuke Shield deck has a very high skill cap because it needs you to be patient. Also, the fact that every time you kill a mob, you are at an SP deficit, it also doesn't help. And if you were to face Ignition or if the missions are unfriendly towards you, you just lost that game for something that's completely out of your control. Not to mention that it is also the deck itself is very high class dependent as well. Well, the higher the class, the better the deck. So it's B tier.
Alright, anything else for Nuke?
Nope.
Alright, moving on. We have Landmine.
Trash tier.
That's
PvP,
is
let it
trash
go.
tier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if it was
obviously
like
for PvP it's trash tier.
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
PvP.
Yes, so we're talking about
yeah.
only PvP here, so yes, it's trash tier. It's not useful
It's
at all.
it's not useful at all.
Alright, how about Sand Cloud? I mean, sorry, Sand Swamp Dice. Sand Cloud would be the trait for it.
Non-traded,
is the only.
it's non-traded. I
Non-tra-
think it's F or at trash tier. I think with
Trash
trade,
tier.
it's at least C tier. You can. There's some arguments for putting it in B tier depending on like what kind of matchup you have.
Well, there
but-
used to be a deck called Combo Stand, but nobody
Yeah.
uses it anymore. So it's C tier.
There was also a
As I've
Guardian
heard-
one as well. in the
Yeah,
base.
there wasn't really ever a combo one actually. It was mainly Guardian and then Solar Moon Sand.
Also, I've heard it was really good back then.
It was really good
Like
because
with
Nuke was
Guardian.
super popular. But now it's not as good because there are decks that just don't care about it.
Yeah. Next.
Alright, next we have the Joker Dice.
S
Oh,
tier.
easy S tier. Easy
S
S
tier.
tier.
Next
agree
to
with
the reverse dice
Next to reverse. Next to reverse.
on the
It's
right.
easiest.
Yep.
Alright, Holy Sword.
Trash tier.
Trash.
Maybe C
It was-
tier.
It's trash. I think I think a C. Yeah, like it's not as bad as the other ones like Landmine and whatnot. Like you can
It's
use
usable,
but it's pretty bad in
Yeah,
the
back in
PvP
the
sense.
old days, it was S tier.
Yeah, but that's the old days. We're not talking
Yeah,
about
this
those.
is
Well, Atomic basically dominated the PB meta, yeah, but now it's not even that great.
I could agree with that. I do remember there was a time, almost 2 years ago or so, where there was a deck that you could run to get to Grand League. It was like Holy Sword with the Lightning Cloud and the Royal Dice. And it actually worked at the time, but that definitely wouldn't fly today. Not at all.
No, absolutely
No,
not.
not today. Yeah.
Nope. Because Storm, or even not even Storm, basically any deck can outlast it now, unfortunately.
Alright, how about Hell Dice?
B tier or
Well,
C tier.
C tier.
I'm sure everybody in the call remembers, Helpful Nuke meta. But
Yes, but we're not
after
talking about
that-
the
We're not there. We're in a new
yeah,
meta.
we're talking about the PvP decks for 2024. So we just let's ignore all of that in the past because
Mhm.
it's not really relevant anymore.
Yeah,
But I
let
think
it
in the
go.
current meta, like putting Hell in
It's
your
pretty
deck is
bad.
asking to lose because you're gonna be so
Soul.
low on SP. And
Yeah,
you're
and plus Soul
beating
is very
players.
dominant. Exactly.
Yep, if you're a Soul player, you love to see Hell. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately for them, not a lot of players are running Hell, so they gotta rely on the Ghost Mobs. But anyways, moving on, we have the Shield Dice.
Yeah, just B tier.
B tier.
B tier because it really only fits into one deck, Shield Nuke, and it's pretty class reliant, and it's also a little bit RNG. You don't get control over where your shields go.
Yeah,
Also,
and I
does it
guess you
get
could
any
argue
bonus
it's
from
not
higher
as consistent as Lock, in a way. But
Yeah, that's true.
Mm.
Well, it supposedly has more of a potential, but yeah.
Okay. Blizzard.
alright, yep. Blizzard Dice.
C tier.
I think C tier.
Definitely
Like you can
Yeah,
make
C
it
tier.
work in some decks, but it's like slowdown effect is like greatly reduced when it comes to Berserk waves.
Yeah, even with the new rework.
Yeah, I like the fact that they made an attempt to, I guess, buff it, which, I mean, I thought it was a interesting buff, but it's still not enough for it to be used regularly in decks.
I mean, it greatly boosted its performance in other aspects of the game, but just not PvP, unfortunately. So it's C tier.
Alright. Moving on to Growth Dice.
S
S
tier.
S tier.
Easy S tier.
I think
Like
I
all
think
the
you're-
way high S tier. Every single deck needs it.
no, I think it's an A tier.
No.
There's a lot more you can do now. There are a lot of other development options where you don't need growth anymore. it is good, yes, but I think like
Come on.
the other decks you can put in almost or like the other dice you can put in pretty much any deck and it's good. Versus with
Well,
growth,
you
like
also have
some
to
decks
keep in mind
don't need growth. Because like I said, there
True.
are other development options. You know, Summoner and Joker.
Oh
Those
yeah,
will do
right.
great. You have Supplement now. You can
Well,
develop straight off using Clone and Reverse. You know, you don't need growth.
Yeah, it's
well,
tier.
your argument on development is correct, but you also have to keep in mind of the growth rate as well, because there are some decks that rely heavily on growth rate. And
Yeah, like
Like
rage, silence,
So
like
and silence.
there's not a substitute for growth rate for those
I
decks.
really think there still is, and I to me it's like you can. The thing is like the other dice you can put them in almost any deck. This one is like it really just doesn't work in
Yeah,
quite a
the
few
only
decks.
decks that use growth rate are silence, silence, and silence.
And Rage.
and rage. Yeah,
And rage. Yeah.
Like I
Next.
think it's a very high A, but I think it can't be put in S with how PvP currently is.
Yeah, and certain decks, if you had to choose between the growth and the supplement, I'm guessing the supplement would probably be the
Supplement.
better choice for missions and stuff anyway.
oh,
Mhm.
definitely.
Well, I guess growth is more cost efficient, but supplement is overall better.
All right,
Okay, now next.
how about Summoner dice?
It's
Uh,
really good with combat
tier.
decks.
Easily A tier.
8.
Yeah, high A
Yeah, I'll
tier.
put it at A tier.
I would say a high A to an S tier. I think the trait with it is really good.
I think
Yeah.
can't go in S because there are a lot of decks where it doesn't work in, but yeah, high A tier because yeah, combo makes it really good with the trait and also new nuke decks, and plus it's very good against aggro, especially assassin.
Speaking of assassin,
Yeah. Speaking of it, what do you guys think of Assassin?
B tier.
I'll put it B tier. Cause
I mean, I'm sure everybody here knows that deck called Hyperson, everyone's favorite deck to face. But it's fairly RG dependent, but it's frustrating if you lose a match just because, you couldn't get the right RNG, but
Yeah.
it's not a strong
It's a-
deck. I've never seen a Hyperson player have more than a 60% win rate in my time playing this deck game, so.
Yeah, true.
I mean, you can have high win rates with it, but like usually that comes with because you have like C15 assassin.
Mhm.
And I think yeah, in general, it's just too RNG.
Like, your RNG depends, your opponent's RNG depends, your Prism procs RNG depends. Like, it's just a very RNG heavy deck.
Yeah, it could either be really good or really bad, especially if you run Hypersen on the Prism board, I'd say. All right, moving on to Atomic.
C tier, maybe.
I'm gonna put
Yeah,
it
it's
as
in the
C
current
tier.
it's C tier for sure.
I mean,
Because
very
of
low
how
C
fast
tier.
because of how fast the mobs get at like berserk waves, it really just falls off because you don't have much time to keep the mobs with like in the atomic range.
It's very close to trash tier.
Yeah, I would say C tier. It used to be a lot better in the past. Obviously, you had Atom EQ, Atomic Tsunami, but in this meta, those decks really wouldn't be a viable option anymore due to missions and stuff.
And aggro.
And
Yeah.
aggro, of course.
Not to mention Phantom Thief exists, so.
That too,
Yeah,
yes.
which is an aggro.
All right, moving on to Gun Dice.
C tier.
Very close to trash tier, but C tier.
Yeah, it's usable, but it's compared to everything else, is you have much better options.
Okay.
There's really not much to be said about it.
Yeah, there's not much. It used to be, well, when it first got reworked, obviously it was meta for about a month or so until the Rage Dice got released. And then after that, I guess everyone just stopped using it, it seems like, for the most part in PvP. Or I could be wrong, I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, no, you're right.
All right.
Typhoon is C tier. I mean, very, very, very low C tier, because it can only be used with Hellflow and Typhoon, and that's it.
Yeah, Typhoon basically, I mean, it won't really go far like at all anymore, and it's not really that useful.
The only dice that you can see it working is with Devil Sword, but it's severely outclassed by Wind dice. Like, it's
Yeah.
not even funny.
Yeah, unless you're going to run it currently in Dice Limit Break if it's buffed, but that's arcade, so we're not really covering that part, so that wouldn't count anyway. But yeah, I could agree that it's C tier. I mean, it shoots fast and all, but it's not really using anything. Obviously, there used to be like Typhoon flow and all that, but you don't see that anymore these days.
Well, I mean, all the aggro decks with Typhoon that you used to see, now you can just replace them with like LC trait, so or Star.
Mhm.
So there's really just no point in using it anymore.
All right, supplement dice.
S tier.
S tier paired with
AT,
reverse.
Yeah, S tier.
I would
I-
say it's
S
S
tier
tier
paired with
thanks to the
reverse.
supplement trait. Yeah.
Mhm.
In my,
thanks to reverse
it's,
dice.
it's really good in missions, but I think it, in my opinion, it deserves A tier because like it's better than growth for some decks, but for other decks, it's just like way worse.
Also, not to mention your spawn cost just skyrockets because you're using supplement. It's like, well,
Yes, it does take a lot more SP to get higher pips with supplement, but usually you don't need a full board of 7 pips.
Right.
In PvP, that's usually bad, so generally that doesn't matter.
the only it helps you win missions much easier. That's very nice.
Yes, and also I guess you could say that it helps you clear out space on your board for certain missions as well, because when you supplement stuff, you're basically combining it and making more space on the board for other things if needed. All right. Anything else on that?
Nope.
I don't think so.
All right. How about meta?
No
I think I already
Trash.
know where this is going.
Trash.
trash tier.
Trash tier.
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
current,
not much
in the
to say
current
about
state
it.
of PvP, it's trash.
All right. How about time dice?
That's
C tier.
B tier when it's high classed.
I think C tier because it really, especially with how much soul there is, and Storm, doesn't get affected by it at all.
Yeah.
It's
And
really
wind
just not that
level.
useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I don't really see it being used in anything recently. I know there was one player on the leaderboard that experimented with that with Soul and Moon, and then there was someone else that tried it with LC and Flow on the lava board. But other than that, I would say it's C tier. All right, moving on to combo.
That's definitely A tier.
I'll put it A tier. Yeah.
Maybe
A tier for
combined
sure.
with Assassin, Silence, Bubble, Reverse, like basically anything.
I would say it's A tier. I think it's a very solid dice to use. It's good on missions. It's a lot of fun to play,
it's
in my
an-
opinion.
It's an all-rounder.
Whether you run the bubble or it seems like a lot more players now are beginning to run the clone bow one on the scope board, which if you merge really fast, then I feel like you could be really good with that deck, assuming that Knight doesn't screw you over later, but you have supplement trait to help mitigate that.
Also, that deck is very good at winning missions as well. It struggles with SP missions, but other than that, it's very good.
Anything else on combo?
No.
All right, how about Lunar? I think I already know where this one's going.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
Lunar is a staple
some-
PvP dice, but unfortunately, it requires to have C12, or
Yeah.
a very fairly high class Lunar. But it's a staple dice. I would say it's A tier.
I think it's high A
It's-
tier because
Oh.
like it works with a lot of decks or with a lot of DPS dice, but the important thing is like it is quite weak to aggro and
Some of
like
you-
berserk bosses later on.
Some of you would disagree with me, but people started stopping using Lunar, and it's more on Pred and Soul, and more
Soul
on
uses Lunar?
Devil. And when
Isn't Soul paired up with Lunar?
Yeah,
yeah, I forgot.
Well,
I
yeah.
see.
I
Somewhat.
think it's still very prevalent because a lot of
Mhm.
people still like to run Soul because it's a very lazy and easy to run deck.
It's a brain dead deck.
All right, yeah.
Well,
I was
people
going to
also like to
say
get C13 Lunar because even if their Lunar turns off, they still get the bonus, attack speed bonus, which can help them win games in certain scenarios as well. So Lunars are fairly strong dice, and it's always been a staple of PvP since it was released in the game.
okay. Yeah, I was going to say that it was S tier, but I'm fine with making it A tier for this.
Well, the reason why it's not in A tier specifically is it's fairly vulnerable to aggro. Because if the Lunar gets silenced or roiled away, you're basically screwed if you can't get it back quick enough.
Okay. All right. Moving on to Star Dice.
Star dice.
C tier.
I think it's B tier because it's good at an aggro basically only Starflow Royal and Starflow Silence.
Silence.
But the advantage that Star gives is it's one pretty much immune to IX, and it's also you can use it to starve your opponents running it on Sandboard. The main thing is it's also very weak to flow, so it's also
Well,
weak to that aggro.
I was going to say the reason why it's in C tier is because it's severely outclassed by Lightning Cloud, but I don't disagree with what you've stated. So yeah, I don't mind
It has a
being in
slight
D tier.
advantage over Lightning Cloud because against like IX and Assassin, you don't need it to be on the edge specifically.
Right.
And also, like I said, you can actually use it to starve your opponents by not activating Star, and that's more utilized throughout Japan and Korea servers. But I think it's pretty similar in ranking to LC.
All right, IX10.
Very
IX10.
solid dice.
A tier
tier.
with trade. It's just so annoying.
Yeah, I'll give it A tier also.
I could agree
Yeah,
with
it's
that.
kind of like a PvP mosquito. Like, it's annoying, and you can beat it, definitely.
I feel like IX is one of those dice where if you have a deck that is weak to it, basically you're probably going to lose against it, which it sucks, but it is what it is. Like Predator.
I mean, you have reverse and all, so it's not the end of the world if stuff gets hacked, but it's definitely difficult to recover from everything getting hacked constantly.
All right, next we have the Silence dice.
Silence dice. A tier.
A tier for sure.
I would say A tier, yeah. The only
Yeah,
thing I
there's
don't like
really-
is sometimes RNG can screw you up with it, but other than that, I could agree with A
Nah,
tier.
that's just a skill issue.
And yeah, with the fact where it only hits the same amount of pips or same amount of dice as it has pips, it is a bit more RNG compared to IX
Yeah.
trait or like Royal, but it really there's really not much you can do once a dice gets silenced. Like there's nothing you can do to reverse it. There's nothing you can do to fix your board. You kind of just have to sit there and wait.
It's kind of a respectful aggro deck, except when you pair it with flow.
All right, in terms of aggro, we also have the Royal dice.
Royal dice.
B tier.
B tier.
It stopped being useful.
Yeah,
It's
I think
effective against soul players sometimes, but when you're
I
not
think
going
it's
up
just
against soul
outclassed by
players,
dice like Silence.
And Devil is really bad at. I mean, it's really bad against Devil because of the quote-unquote nerf.
Yeah. When it works great, but the problem is that if there's certain decks that where if you're running the Royal dice as opposed to the Silence, you're basically doing nothing to them. Such as if you go up against like a Storm player, Royal does basically nothing to them. Or
If you're going against a
even playing
Nuke
the-
player,
you're just helping
they have
them.
Tsunami.
yeah,
and you're just helping them.
basically yeah.
It's
If you're
like-
going up against like an LC flow deck and you have the Royal instead of the Silence, you're basically helping them grow their board every time you flip them.
Also,
Almost
not to
feels
mention,
like.
roll is also RNG, because you can try to roll an LC player to get rid of their silences, but you can just give them more growth, or vice versa.
And more flow.
You could, or you're probably going to just give them more jokers so that they can just joker it back if it's the same dot count.
Next.
Alright, next we have Yinyang.
Trash
boy.
can out of here.
It's
It's
trash.
trash,
Trash
but
is
like
trash.
it is bad, but I think it has to go in C,
C
like
tier.
comparing because like it is still usable at like low, at like low grand. Like
from
Low
classes 1 to 10.
I mean, like
it's
AP,
probably
yes,
good.
it's bad, but like, are you gonna say that oh no, Yinyang is worse than Typhoon? Like, it's
No.
that's a hard thing to say. So
Saying
AP, I know you have
Yinyang
personal opinions, but we're looking at this just
saying Yinyang
actually.
is good is like saying that Satellite is bad.
Well, see,
Wow. I don't think.
So
Okay.
wait, so you just said it's true then, because you said saying Yinyang is good is like saying Satellite is bad, and Satellite is bad, so
Satellite
that means
is
Yinyang is good.
Satellite is good.
AP.
well, Yinyang
You need a-
Yinyang would be a
I'm
competitive
kidding. I'm
option
kidding.
if it's paired up with an aggro dice. Well, I'm sure if everybody faced a couple of Royangs in their time, but you don't see that like any often anymore
Yeah,
because it's just
I'm kidding. I'm
bad.
kidding.
The problem is Yinyang is just severely outclassed now. I mean, would you play Yinyang or would you play Storm? The answer is you would play Storm because it's more versatile and it
Adelaide.
can go further. But yeah, for newer players, Yinyang is, I mean, not a bad deck to build, but the drawback is that you really do need Joker and Switch to even play Yinyang because the chances of you getting Harmony without those two dices are is basically not possible.
I mean, you could use Magic Breaker and have the triple growth,
I mean, yeah, but are you gonna live that long?
But these are grand players we're talking about. I know only like a few couple players that use Yin Yang in grand voting class. So
Guys, it's Yinyang. It's not that deep.
Yeah, and thanks to Royal, you really don't see it anymore. All right, how about Scope?
Severely outclassed by Scope Board, but it's good in one deck, and that's Rage. So maybe B tier.
Minimum B tier, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's B tier because
okay enough.
it's strong, like for certain dice. But yeah, the fact that you need to have like use up a dice slot for that when you could just use scope board makes it pretty weak.
All right, and Guardian dice.
C tier.
I mean, it got
Probably
above,
B tier.
but it's probably B tier.
Yeah, I can
Because
agree.
there
with
were
B
some
tier.
decks with like Guardian Silence and Guardian Royal, but
Yeah, there was a Guardian
as
deck going around about a week or two ago with the Bubble and the Silence, but I don't see it being used anymore. Unless that was just to experiment with the Guardian rework.
Yeah, I think it's just not like as strong as the other PvP dice or as the other DPS dice that you could be using.
it's more of like a survivability kind of thing. You just gotta try to pressure your opponent down before you lose. But that's about it.
All right, moving on to Earthquake.
I mean, it's usable. It's
Is
not
it?
not
I
not
think
very
it's
good, but it's
yeah,
usable.
I think it's pretty
Yeah.
solid in C because in the current meta, there's just not really a good use for it when you have Tsunami.
Time Winder, I would say it's easy B tier because it is viable in one deck, but that deck is very strong, so it's B tier.
Recharge.
Recharge, well, it was the go-to DPS until, Soul was added, but I would say
think
it's
in
B.
light of current things, it's B because yeah,
B,
it's not as good with missions as if you were just play Soul. So like they do have relatively similar damage outputs. Soul is stronger still, and its ability to win missions because you don't have to spend like any SP with Soul is just too strong.
Yeah, I agree with that. It used to be the go-to, and it's basically outclassed by Soul. Even in co-op, everyone prefers Soul now over it. And yeah, with missions, even with the trait, it makes winning missions even more difficult. It feels like. All right.
Lightning Cloud, it's
B.
B tier,
Yeah,
definitely
B.
higher than Star though.
High B tier.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I can agree with it being B tier. The only thing that sucks is that since it's position dependent, if you don't get them in the right spots, it could screw you over sometimes early game. All right. Anything else for Lightning Cloud?
Nope.
All right. Last but not least, it looks like we have the Storm dice.
Storm
High B
dice.
tier. Yeah, so Storm is high B tier when it's played with Dimension, but it's easily countered by Ignition
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Flow.
and Flow.
Well,
I mean,
Flow.
you can beat Flow with Tsunami.
Yeah, with Tsunami. We're talking about Storm.
Well, AP, the problem is that you constantly rely on a Tsunami to merge or to copy with
Yo, I'm
Storm.
just that good.
This is all just another reason why Tsunami is an A tier, but not Storm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's all that really needs to be said.
Storm is just very fragile.
Yeah, it's good for low class, but as of now, it's with a lot of ignition. It's super fragile.
Yeah, I would say Storm fell off hard the last season or so. It used to be used a whole lot more, but now thanks to Ignition and other decks, it just doesn't really seem like a viable option. Well, besides the Dimension deck, but that's an exception. Alright guys, this is the final list that we came up with. Remember, this tier list is based solely on our opinions. Feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts if you disagree with any of the placements. Anyways, that's it for the video. Thanks, and I will see you guys next time.
Like and subscribe and turn on notifications. On God.